Fáilte Catherine, it's brilliant to have yourself and your nephew Paddy McEvoy here in the Irish Traditional Music Archive. Fáilte.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to dissect your life in music thus far today. But Catherine, would you mind for our listeners to know you as one of Ireland's leading flute players, and that's not just me saying that. You've Gradam Ceoil, TG4 awards and all types of, you've a great standing in traditional music circles and further afield too. But if we rewound to the start, what were your earliest memories or exposure to the traditional Irish music growing up in Birmingham?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that introduction. Well, born in Birmingham, both parents, Paddy and Sarah, were from County Roscommon. Just myself and my brother John, who's a fiddle player. You're familiar with John in the family. And I suppose, there was always a wee bit of music in the house from the point of view that Dad could knock a few tunes out on the whistle, and my mother was actually a really good ballad singer. And always reckoned that she didn't really get the chance, but any sort of little sort of parties, with friends and that, they'd always say, "Oh, Sarah, sing a song," and she would. She had her, couple of songs that she'd sing. But to actually, get involved in traditional music and my introduction to it, it was really by chance that I was at a parish dance. St. Patrick's was our local parish, and I saw some Irish dancers. And I thought, oh, I'd like to have a go at that. And I suppose I was about 10 maybe at the time. And the local the teacher was a woman called Anne King, who is now living, actually, I think she lives down in Roscommon. She's back in, I don't know whether she was originally from Roscommon. She wasn't, she would have been born in Birmingham, but I started taking Irish dancing lessons with her. But the music that she used to have us dancing to, which was, I suppose, even for those times, was so unusual. It was like Michael Coleman records, and Sean Maguire and the Four Star Quartet,
Couldn't get better.
Couldn't get better. And of course, I'd be lepping around to this, and it really got to me. And she used to lend us the records. In a positive sense, yeah. And she used to lend us the Coleman records to bring home. And my brother, who was actually away in boarding school at the time and had started playing classical fiddle and had sort of sneaked in a few Dubliners records and stuff and was learning stuff off them. And of course, he heard this music as well, and, he started trying to learn tunes off it himself, I was probably slightly a bit slower insofar as by default my mother, and I don't know why she did this, she had bought a piano accordion, and Paddy, you're probably going to laugh at this, had bought a piano accordion from the local butcher who was trying to get rid of it. I had bought it for John, and of course he'd no interest in it at all, So I picked up this thing and started messing around with it, and from listening to I can't remember what record we're talking about, the records, no CDs in those days. I learned a tune off it called "The Pigeon on the Gate."
Oh, lovely.
Now it was a tune to me, whether it was a real jig or hornpipe or what, So a couple of weeks later, down at another local parish dance, because my mother was on the committee and she used to do the sandwiches and stuff.
Oh, it's very important.
The dance there, the dancers were there, and there was a woman playing the piano accordion, and her name was Kathleen Laurie.
I see, yeah.
And I actually went up to her and I said, "Would you teach me, how to play?" And she says, I would, So that was really the beginning of I'm going to say, the journey.
Yeah.
And I went out to Kathleen for my first lesson. Now, Kathleen's mother was also from County Roscommon, and it turned out that her dad then was Dr. Lowry, and he was from Scotland. He was a Scottish gentleman. Mrs. Lowry was a district nurse, and had done a huge lot of work for, you know, Irish people and that in Birmingham. But their house was the centre, really, of traditional music in Birmingham at that time, and it had been so from sort of I'm talking about the late 60s, but from probably the late 50s, early 60s. And so went out for a lesson, and I said, I can play a tune. And she says, okay, play the tune. And I sort of, in some fashion, played this Pigeon on the Gate. And she was sort of slightly taken aback, but and probably because I was playing the accordion upside down.
Yeah.
You know?
To make it harder again.
So she said, yeah, that's really good, you know. Let's try it with the accordion the other way up. And of course, I couldn't play at all then, you know. Yeah. So, so that was the beginning of it. And I used to go out every week on a Tuesday, and I'd have my lesson, and my dad would drive me out, and it was sort of a case of, you know, poor old dad coming in from work, day on the buildings, tired, you know, going up, treading lightly, and saying, Dad, could you drive me out, you know? Yeah. And of course there was never any problem, but, you know, not like nowadays where it's sort of, come on, get that instrument, come on, your lesson is, you know. It was sort of a bit me.
You were self-motivated.
I was self-motivated, yeah. Meanwhile, John was away in boarding school, you know, and ploughing away at the fiddle. Yeah.
Any chance now? I won't ask you to play the piano accordion today, but
oh God, no.
Could you play it's certainly not upside down anyway. But would you give the Pigeon on the Gate? So that was the first tune.
It was the very first tune.
You learned.
That I learned. I'll have a go at it.
Great.
And the tune after it is one that we used to play with the band, and I'm sure there's another name of it, but we called it the Clunche.
Yeah.
The Clunche Reel.
Just with the Birmingham
with the Ceili band. Yeah.
Brilliant, yeah.
And the Clunche Reel. Clunche is in Roscommon.
Yeah.
Great. So we have a go at these, Paddy.
fantastic, yeah. Great. What a first tune to learn, the Pigeon on the Gate. Yeah.
Well, I don't think I've played it quite like that now, but sure, look.
I was reading, I think there an interview with Louis Quinn, actually. He was making a kind of poignant but obvious point, like some of these great tunes, they'd last you your whole lifetime. Like, you know,
oh God,
you'd never get...
Yeah, and you'd never get tired of them. That's the thing about them, you know.
You can leave a tune like that, a good tune like that for 10, 20 years and come back and enjoy it a different way. Like. Can I ask about growing up in Birmingham? And maybe, Paddy, you could comment on this as well. There's such a, you know, music-wise, I can hear such a strong Sligo, Roscommon, North Connacht style and punch and rhythm coming out there, beautiful ornamentation, and of course, like, you know, the likes of Coleman and dominated the type of style everyone wanted to play that time too. But what was the sense of growing up in Birmingham as an Irish, in an Irish community, and what you're describing with Irish dancing and Ceili bands and I'd imagine, did it involve the education system and the schools you go to? What was it like, I suppose? And maybe both of you can address that.
Well, I suppose from my point of view, we were actually sent to private schools, you know, and while a lot of our friends were Irish, you know, at the time I would have been going to primary school, I suppose, you know, we weren't involved in the music at that stage, and education was really important, you know, to my parents. And, you know, we were both sent to, my brother was sent to the Christian Brothers, and I, you know, both fee-paying schools, you know. And so, and then when we went to secondary school, as I say, John actually went to a Cotton College, which was what they would call a public school over there, but again, sort of a fee-paying school. And I went to a grammar technical school, and my mother was quite put out at the time because the local Catholic grammar school I didn't actually get into. So this was sort of like a how could I say it, Church of England would have been the dominant. But at the time, like, I remember she went up to the parish priest and he says, "Oh, don't worry about it, grand," you know. So I went off to this school, and the thing is, there weren't that many Irish people there, and that was a really good school and that, but always felt slightly like a fish out of water, you know. And I do remember they did celebrate St. Patrick's Day, you know, and we used to have assemblies every morning, and I remember the music teacher saying to me at the time, "Would you bring your accordion in and play?" You know, because there was a girl there that did a bit of Irish dancing, so I brought my accordion in and we played at the morning assembly, and of course we got a clap and everything. And I remember the teacher coming up to me, she says, "That's really interesting. Do you make it up as you go along?" Oh, yeah. I was totally disgusted, you know. Yeah. But, you know, it was really like my main, how could I say, social outlet then at that time was through the musicians with the Birmingham Ceili Band. In school, the other direction would have been, I mean, reggae was a big thing at the time, you know, and where we lived in an ethnic community, and we had like an Indian family next door to us, and like a Jamaican family living the other side of us, you know, and so it was very ethnic. And at the back of our house there was a park, and a big park, and every year they had a reggae festival, you know, so, you know, and of course my dad working on the buildings as well, and he, you know, like, Dad was so gregarious, everybody loved him, and, you know, and he'd be coming home, you know, and he'd be picking up certain terminologies. I remember when we moved in, actually, into our house in Meath, and he was doing a bit of work on it and doing a bit of plastering, and my own kids were tiny at the time, you know, and he'd be there and he'd be plastering away, and he'd be saying, man, you know. And I remember Rory coming up to me and saying, "Why does Granda keep saying, yeah, man?" And I had to explain that was one of the terminologies that he picked up on the building side. You know. But getting back to you know, like the music and the centre of it really was the household, the Lorry household. Any musicians who came over from Ireland at the time, they, you know, they stayed there, you know, and so that's how I got to meet a lot of musicians. Paddy, maybe you want to intervene about your...
Yeah, well, we weren't sent to private school. But my experience is maybe a bit different, and I mean the one thing. Well, yeah, things. In some respects, the one thing that struck me at school, I suppose, looking back on it, was the sheer volume of Irish people in school. And I'd say 80 to 90% of the kids were Irish, and people ask me now, you know, you grew up in England and went to school in England, and what were the English like? We didn't really know many English kids. There weren't English kids in school. It was mostly Irish and maybe a few Italians and Polish people as well, that his parents had come after the Second World War and settled in Birmingham. And I suppose... not even that, but it was certain counties in Ireland as well. There was a huge Roscommon and Mayo presence in school. We didn't really have many friends whose parents were from Kerry or Cork or other counties. It was really kind of North Connacht. And I think if you listen to the music from Birmingham, it definitely has that North Connacht kind of sound. But yeah, there just seemed to be so many Irish people there, and the GAA was huge. So, I mean, talking about what was going on in the All Ireland on a Monday morning in the schoolyard was probably more common than Villa versus Birmingham City. It was kind of looking towards Ireland. And I suppose then coming back to Ireland when I was 15 or 16, it was a bit of a shock in some respects, because went to school and
they were more interested in Villa and Birmingham.
Exactly, it was the other way. It was Man U and Liverpool, and you know, maybe a bit of the druckfass on the Irish music, and you know, in school in Birmingham it was kind of like the patriotic thing that you were playing Irish music, and then in Dunshaughlin, whereas in school maybe I might be going too far to say there was druckfass, but it wasn't there wasn't a huge amount of interest in the Irish music.
Wasn't what you were expecting anyway.
Yeah. So that was kind of my experience.
And Catherine, going back as well, so you're to our viewers now, they're in shock that you were playing the piano accordion, and then you transitioned then to, am I correct, on piano, whistle, flute. Could you talk us through that instrumental, I won't say graduation, in case we offend any piano accordion players, they have a hard enough time of it.
I soon realised, just to go back, in the primary school now that I went to the primary, there were a good few Irish families, you know, but in the secondary school, not that many, you know, so it's just the way it sort of worked out. But the transition from the piano accordion, it was a sort of like a gradual realisation. I ended up playing the piano with the Birmingham Ceili band. I would have been the youngest member, and you know, I was only in my, what would I have been, like 14, you know, and
at 14 as well, you've very humbly, you didn't mention there, you'd won an All-Ireland on the piano accordion at age 11 or younger.
Sort of one of my darker
Well, we're coming clean on all the history here now. But so 14, then you were obviously very talented and invited into the band as the youngest member.
And I say we had a piano at home, so I would, and when John would come home on a holiday, I'd sit in at the piano banging away and that, you know. Of course, not to the standard of Paddy here, but I just came in at the time when a flute player called Frank Jordan, great man who's now still alive down in Roscommon, well into his 90s. I don't know what age, must be about 95 now. And Frank had moved back with his family to Roscommon. And another gentleman arrived on the scene, a man called Tom McHale, who was a great whistle player. I think at the time the two big whistle players were Mary Bergen and Tom. And he actually was quite a good flute player. And at the time, this instrument was in the Lowry household. They had sort of come by it, you know, and through a friend of the relative. And so Tom started playing the flute with the band. I was on the piano. And of course, most of the Ceilidhs we played at, Tom would play a solo on the flute or on the whistle or whatever. And I was sort of really taken with this. So I started teaching myself a few tunes on the whistle and that. And after that, then the visitors, I started taking note of the visitors who were coming to the Lowry household, and I used to be invited because they knew I was really interested in the music. And some of the first visitors there would have been Josie McDermott, of course the Roscommon connection. They would have known Josie really, really well because Mrs. Lowry was originally from Knockvicar, which wasn't too far from Ballyfarn, and you know.
Yeah.
Josie McDermott and Peg McGrath.
Yeah.
And when I heard them play, it was sort of like, whoa, this is something, this is totally, you know, off the wall. I absolutely loved it, you know. So and of course Patsy Hanley then, Patsy, young Patsy would be coming over as well. So I persuaded my parents to get me a flute. We knew nothing about flutes at all. And so we went into a shop in the centre of Birmingham, like an antique shop, and saw this flute. And I don't know, I can't remember what they paid for it. It was a German pin-mounted, you know, which is very hard to find a good one. But anyway, brought it home, spent about 2 weeks trying to figure out how to get a sound out of it. And I got a sound. I mean, one sound. Ran into my mother and said, I got a sound out of it, you know. It took 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Of course, the thing was leaking, you know, and I didn't realise. When I did cop on, then what I did was I took every key off, took all the pins out, figured out how to do it, and I got black electrical tape.
Yeah.
And I wrapped it around all the holes and blocked it off. And I was playing that flute like that for, I'd say, a good while, you know.
Yeah.
And
it's a tough enough instrument to teach yourself to start with without any classes.
And then I was being given records, like Kathleen used to lend me records. I had, obviously, from the accordion point of view, Joe Burke, Finn Dwyer, who was actually my hero at the time. I'd been playing the piano accordion. And Seamus Tansey, king of the concert flute and that. And I was like, what is he doing? What is he doing, you know? And so I used to slow the ALP down to listen. And of course, all you could hear was sort of this bubbling sound, you know, when he was doing the ornamentation and that. Yeah. And basically from listening to that, that's how I figured out to do the bubbly things. Now I didn't even know they were called rolls, really, you know, I just sort of did them. And then, of course, if you were trying to learn the tune, you had to put it back up to normal, get the key in your head, slow it down again, try and figure out the bit, and then figure out the key of it on. So it was a very laboured process. But I did it, and and that's how I would have learned most of my stuff. Yeah. But what happened then was Tom McHale, who I was talking about earlier, decided to go back to Ireland. He was only in Birmingham for about a year, I'd say. And the Oireachtas was coming up, and the Oireachtas was a huge thing at the time for a lot of bands, I think, even bigger than the Flower, really. And so basically they said, there's the flute, learn the tunes. So they got another girl, Celestine Boyle, whose dad played the accordion with the band, and Celestine, who was a far better piano player than I was, she came in on the piano, and I learnt the tunes on the flute, and that was it.
The rest is history. Yeah,
the rest is history.
Yeah.
And you know, coming over, I used to love coming over for the Oireachtas, and we did a few recordings for Ceili House and that, but it was in the GPO.
Yeah.
And I remember we used to stay in the Castle Hotel, and we used to dress up in the uniforms, and we used to walk up to the GPO, and I remember Tommy Boyle, who was Celestine, the girl who was playing the piano, her uncle was a great drummer. Poor Tommy actually only passed away there about a year ago, you know. And we used to walk up O'Connell Street, you know, and I used to be thinking, this is great, you know. Everybody knows who we are, you know. Yeah. Of course, nobody had a clue, you know. But we used to do the recordings, and it was who was doing Ceili House at that time? Sean O'Murco, was it?
All right, yeah.
And that was the experience and a half. You know?
Would you consider playing a selection of tunes, maybe associated with the Birmingham Ceili band, maybe a couple of reels that from?
Yeah, I'll have a go. There's actually a tune that I had totally forgotten. It's called the Templegate reel, and I had been at Scoil Acla, and I was going around the classes, you know, playing, and I went into PJ Hernan's class, you know, PJ from Connemara, great box player.
And he's up on the wall here.
And he's up on the wall there, brilliant. Yeah. And he said to me, do you know this tune? Would you play this tune for me? I called it Catherine McEvoy's tune, and he played it, and of course I was, God, do I know that tune? And then I copped, yeah, we used to play that in the band. And I wrote down the first few notes, and of course I sort of relearned it. And myself and John actually recorded this a while back. But yes, the Templegate, and then McFadden's.
Lovely.
Okay.
Lovely. Lovely, fantastic, yeah. Catherine, you described as well teaching yourself effectively and slowing recordings down and speeding them up and figuring them out. So it's very much the school of self direction and you're so self-motivated. Can you talk to us a little bit about your access to records? I know you mentioned Paddy Ryan to me before and Mick Daly, and you sourced other tunes from Brandon Brannock's collection, and Can you just talk to us a little bit about your sources there, that period when you're in Birmingham?
Yeah, it was mainly, well, of course, the big, I suppose, records at the time were, you know, Irish champions, Paddy Kenny, PJ Hayes and Paddy O'Loughlin. And the Joe, and Bridie Lafferty on the piano. And there was also obviously Joe Burke's record tribute to Coleman, and which Kathleen Laurie had given me a present of, and I loved that, and of course Felix Dolan was on it, and Andy McGann, and then the Sean Ryan recordings, Sean Ryan and PJ Moloney. And Paddy Ryan would have had, well, actually, he had that on reel to reel, along with a lot of other stuff. And Paddy was really good. He used to, at the time then, when my brother John came home from boarding school, you know, during the holidays and that, he used to go up to Paddy, and for, you know, Paddy'd give him a few tunes and that, and course, give him the recordings, bring them home, and my mother had actually, for Christmas, had bought us a second-hand big reel-to-reel thing about the size of the table, you know, and we just used to listen, you know, listen so much to that stuff. I used to put, Mum and Dad might go out at night, maybe for a drink or whatever, and I'd put on the reel to reel, and I'd lie back and I'd be listening, and I'd be imagining I was in Ireland, you know. And the next thing, of course, I'd fall asleep, and the tape would be going, you know, noising around. The tape would have finished and come off, and that was it. And an awful lot of stuff, I'd say, went in by osmosis. You know, I mean, listening was just such a huge part of it. And you know, also, you know, I'd learn tunes, and of course the cassettes came out then at the time, and you know, I'd be playing away in the kitchen. Probably should have been doing my homework, but I'd be playing away in the kitchen, you know, and I'd say, okay, I'll tape myself, and I'd tape myself, and I would sound woeful, you know, and I'd be trying to figure out, well, why do I sound like that? What? And that's how I figured out the breathing, and the phrasing, you know, which is so important, of course, in fiddle playing as well as flute playing and all instruments, you know. Of course, I don't know whether you've read Conall O'Grath's book. You know, Conall's a great flute player. Conall says in his book that, you know, all the other instruments are trying to copy the phrasing on the flute. Which was funny. But yeah, that was basically it. Like, I spent hours, you know, hours at it, hours and hours, because I mean that was my pastime, basically.
No, it's very interesting to hear you speak to, because it's in an era now where there's everything from Zoom classes online and right down to summer schools.
But as I say I mean, I've said it to my own pupils, you can go to a class every week, you can do as much as, you know, but you won't learn near as much as listening. You know, that's where it's at. You know? It's about learning a language or something, isn't it? The acquiring stage,
and you started to come across to Ireland more and more, and then in 1977, am I right? You made the big.
I made the big move. Yeah. What happened now? Before that, there was another musician actually who was quite influential, and that was a great fiddle player called Brendan Mulvihill.
Of course.
So he had actually. He was living in the States. He was born in Northampton, but was brought up in the Bronx. And his father would have been a great fiddle player and composer, Martin Mulvihill, you know, and he taught so many musicians in and around New York and that. And so we actually, as teenagers, we played together quite a lot, you know, a good bit of music. And so I would have learned tunes off him. And then he went back to the States, and I had been in college and had a few health issues, so I had left teacher training college and worked for a while, and then decided Ireland, that's it, I'm going to. And of course at the time it was weird because everybody else was coming in the other direction. You know, and I was going back to Ireland, you know, and not that my parents tried to talk me out of it, but they knew that I pretty much had my mind set on it, you know.
Was the music a big part of that equation?
Music was a big thing, and you see, during the holidays we had been coming over to Ireland, you know, like my parents used to bring us back, you know, and I remember my dad driving, the first car he got was a Mini Clubman, which was the mini car with the little bit of a back on it. And I spent my time on the road to Holyhead with my piano accordion at the time, sitting in the boot with the accordion.
Yeah, not upside down.
Not upside down. No. But so, you know, like, and then obviously we used to go to Flas and that and meet people. But from the competitive element was never a huge thing that grabbed to me. You know, it was more the meeting. In actual fact, having to go and play in a competition was a pain and, you know, a real pain because you were missing something. Yeah. Or, you know, meeting somebody or listening to something, you know. But yeah, so I decided to move back, and so I did in 1977. And another thing, there used to be weekend in Gormanston College, in County Meath, and we used to always come over from Birmingham for that. And it was a great weekend of music, and I got to I met John Joe Gardner. You know, and because Patsy Hanley would be there, and Mick O'Connor, your dad, would be there, and you know, there was so many musicians, you know, and it was such a joy. It was an absolute joy, and we'd be crying going back to Birmingham, you know. So, and actually that's where I met my now husband, Tom, and it's where my brother met Tom's sister, Jacinta, who was Paddy's mum. And so things sort of took off from there. I moved back in 1977, and Tom, who'd sort of started playing the flute a couple of years earlier, and he had been going to the Four Seasons and that, and so that was my introduction basically to music in Dublin. It was the Four Seasons. You know.
Brilliant. So. Can I ask you, before we go on to the Four Seasons and that scene in Dublin, was there some tunes that, unusual ones you'd learned as well from the Molloy Hills as well?
You'd be familiar with Michael Daly, the great recorder of traditional music, who lived in England at the time, and he loved Brendan Mulvihill's playing, and he you know, he was very taken with him, and his niece May Hart, who lives down in Keeju or Ballyfarnan, she sent me a CD of stuff that Michael had recorded from it's from 1974, and it was myself and Brendan playing together. And I'm not sure, it must have been recorded in Birmingham, I'd say. But there was a couple of tunes, and I was sort of, oh wow, I don't play that tune at all now, but there were two hornpipes.
Lovely.
So I resurrected them.
Learned them back off yourself.
I learned them back off myself. And I have a recording of myself and Brendan actually playing the first one. The second one is a recording of Brendan on his own, but we used to play it together, and it was called The Hangman's Noose, and I've never actually heard anybody playing it. And it was composed by Frank McCallum, you know, who wrote The Home Ruler.
Yeah.
So hope I get through these.
Oh gosh, yeah. it's a very unusual one, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's
isn't
lovely.
it?
The
Yeah,
F naturals
yeah,
are
yeah,
lovely.
yeah.
They caught me there in the first part. Yeah, it's lovely. Yeah. So the move to Dublin then, and that scene in the Four Seasons with, what was it, John Kelly and Joe Ryan and that gang?
Yeah, John, old John Kelly, holding fort. I remember him walking across the road carrying the fiddle and the hat, and you know, like that. But it was so good that he held everything together, you know. I mean, when nobody started to tune until John started to tune. And, you know, if there was anybody new coming in, you know, they would quietly play in the background, and then John would always say, play a tune.
Yeah.
You know, play a tune. So, and there was the Sunday night sessions, and it was great. It was a great scene, you know, and like I would have learnt so much. But I have to tell you a funny story. I actually told this down in Milltown. I remember young John telling old John, it was we had got engaged, you see, on the Saturday, and we went into the Four Seasons on the Sunday. Tom and myself got engaged, and young John said to old John, "Did you hear about Tom and Catherine? You know, they got engaged, getting married." And old John had the pipe. "It will never work." Two flute players, you see.
Yeah.
So he had the comment, you know, "It will never work."
Yeah. God, were you sitting there or yeah?
Oh, lovely, 43 years later.
Yeah. God.
We're hanging in anyway.
Yeah.
So so it was great, and that's actually where so many years later, I had originally met Felix Dolan, the great piano player from New York, with Atafla, and Brendan Mulvihill would have introduced me to him, you know. And all those years later, who walks into the Four Seasons but Felix?
Yeah.
And he came up to me and he said, "I met you, you know," I can't remember in what year, it was probably 73, 72, whatever. And and I said, "Oh," he says, "Felix Dolan." And I was, "Oh, right, wow, you know."
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of a great friendship.
Yeah, and great recordings.
A great recording,
and
you know.
Yeah. Are there any tunes, Catherine, from the Four Seasons and John Kelly? What are any tunes that jump out that are still with you?
Oh, yeah, well, there's so many. But I know one set that we used to play was Dan Breen. We called it Dan Breen's set. And the last one, I can't think of the name of the middle one. Flowers of the Red Mill, is it?
Oh,
and,
lovely, yeah.
And the Pretty Girls of Mayo. Yeah. Are these Castle Ceili band tunes as well?
I think.
You see, an awful lot of the sets there were Castle Ceili band stuff, you know.
Yeah,
it was great.
I think
great stuff.
Michael Tuberty was in here in ITMA not so long ago, and he was. I always thought Dan Breen associated with the War of Independence and all this, but it's a different Dan Breen.
He's a whistle player,
from West Clare, so Michael Tuberty got that tune. I think brought it up then with the castle and on to John and Joe. Sure, yeah.
We'll have a go.
Have a go at it. Yeah, great. lovely, lovely. Yeah. It's hard to beat those tunes, isn't it?
They're great tunes. Great tunes.
You're talking about Joe Burke. The old tunes are the best, but you can't find the spare parts for them. Kat, so in your own professional life as well, you've had an amazing career and had a huge impact in teaching people with visual difficulties as well, and music played a huge role in that as well. Can
Absolutely.
You talk to us a little bit about your work there?
I always find it fascinating, really, the way my life sort of, took turns. And I mean, after learning so much music from Josie McDermott and that, and with his visual disability, and I ended up teaching blind children or people with a visual impairment.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just by default. Again, I was actually working in the Culturlan at the time on the switchboard.
Yeah.
And this gentleman rang, a priest. He was the principal of the school at the time. His name was Partalon O'Leary.
Oh wow.
And he was from Gugan Barra.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
And he loved music.
Yeah.
And he was, as I say, principal of the school, St. Joseph's School for Children with Visual Impairment. It was St. Joseph's School for the Blind at that time in Drumcondra. And he asked, is there anybody there that teaches music or whatever? And I had been doing quite a lot of teaching. I had classes in Trinity College when Mary I'd worked with Mary Bergen, the great whistle player, and when Mary moved to Spiddle, I took over her whistle class and that, and then I'd been, teaching a bit on the flute as well. I sort of said, I do a bit of teaching myself, and he said, well, could we meet up? So I said, okay, and we met up, and the rest is history, basically. I had no experience of teaching people with a visual impairment or blind. So I started working in the school, and again, the piano, accordion, whistle. There's a couple of the children there that I started on playing flutes, and because they had all the instruments there. Well, not the flutes. I had actually got the flutes, but they had loads of accordions and stuff. And the man that had been there before me wasn't a traditional musician, but he had done a certain amount of work. But I sort of decided to take it in a different direction, and I started teaching, obviously, traditional tunes and that. And we formed a little group. Now, a lot of the children, there were a good number of the children who were blind, totally blind. And that disability came from when a baby was born with prematurely. What they used to do was obviously put it in an incubator and bombard it with oxygen. But in actual fact, what that did was it destroyed the retina, and they found out afterwards. Yeah. So it was blindness of prematurity is what they called it. You don't get that now because they discovered what the cause of it was. You have other things that cause the disabilities. But anyway, so, and there were other children who obviously just had other inherited visual impairments. So, yeah, and I started teaching, and it was going really, really well. And then Sloga was going at the time. And so we decided, okay, why don't we just put a little group together and we'll put them in for Sloga, And we ended up winning the traditional group competition, and I remember we were in the final, and the other group that came second was Martin Hayes's group.
Yeah.
Martin had been doing a lot of teaching down in Tudor at the time. So that was great, and it sort of gave a great G up. And Sloga was great for all sorts of other things. I mean, within the school, it wasn't just the music, although music built up to be a huge thing, but they had what we would call clay modelling, and they had a teacher under the auspices of the VEC. Obviously, we were. Who would come in, and the children would do work with their hands, which was great because, you know, with the visual impairment, you know, it really helped them from a tactile point of view.
Dexterity of the
dexterity.
Fingers, yeah.
And I remember one, Michael Keane was his name, and this was after a couple of years. He decided to enter the finals of Sloga. Well, he got through to the finals of Sloga, and he made a traditional group. With a flute player and a fiddle player and a baritone player, and I think he had to put an uilleann piper in, and all these he made all the figurines. And he won. I mean, this is out of the whole country. He won. And the same fella then went on to be a great artist. Yeah. And I think he made some statue for the sea. He was from Trim. And I think there's actually a bronze in the middle of Trim, which is actually made by Michael. So, and the music really took off. And, I mean, you know, every child in the school at that time would get a chance at doing music. And then I think it was in 85, I started a family, and I decided I'd stay at home for a while. And I knew the tenure of the job. You know, it would take somebody, first of all, with patience, and secondly, that was used to teaching and that. So I rang my great friend Mary Mac. Mary McNamara, the concertina player from Tulla. And I said to Mary, look, you know, are you interested in this? And I mentioned to the principal, of course, so Mary came up for the interview, and she got the job, and Mary did great work as well. And Mary introduced the fiddle, actually, into the school. And they ended up then in 91 winning Sloga again under Mary.
Shouldn't beat the Tulla gang again.
Probably. But and then Mary got married and started the family, and so she rang me, and my youngest, which was Fergus at the time, was about 2 at the time, and she said, look, would you be interested in coming back in again? You know, so I was a bit nervous, but I went back in again, and sure, look, it was just, it was great, you know, and introduced the uilleann pipes, which was great. And so Gay McKeown from the Pibri uilleann came in regular. Well, actually, no, Mary had introduced the uilleann pipes before that, and Mick O'Brien was actually coming in sort of on, say, a 1 monthly basis, you know, and but then Gay McKeown then started coming in weekly. And there was a wee girl called Amy, and she couldn't walk when she came to the school. She was totally blind, and but she could sing perfectly in tune. And she could pick tunes up on the whistle, you know. And I said to Gay, this wee girl, she's amazing, you know. So when she came to about 10, you know, I said to Gay, would come in and just see what you think. So Gay came in, and he said, right, okay. So we got her set up with a bag and chanter. That was it. She took off, and she's amazing. She's amazing. You'd be familiar with Amy.
I heard her playing a slow air. Really just stopped me in my tracks. Like Well, it must be a great feeling as well, you know, given all that gift of music and given to people, and
absolutely,
people that would have an additional barrier to access the music we love.
And we made a CD. I just decided applied to the Arts Council, and they very kindly gave us funding, because I thought there's so many of the, you know, the blind musicians out there, and nobody really knows about them because they don't compete in FLAS. You know, so, you know, let's see if we can do something. So I got in contact with John Blake, and John was really, really kind and brought his recording equipment out to the house, to my cabin, and I managed to get a gang of them, a cohort of them together, and we recorded a CD. But the problem was, what are we going to call it? You know, you can't sort of, I mean, the thing is, their music is their important thing, not their visual disability.
Be defined by that,
so I consulted with them all, and I asked them, you know, what do you think, you know? And I had done an awful lot of research. In fact, I had come in traditional music archives, and I had researched about blind musicians and that, and to write the notes, you know. And I realised, you know, there's a very, very strong tradition there, naturally, you know. And so in some way, we're going to have to, there's a blind tradition. There is a blind tradition. So in the end, we came up with a musical vision, the blind tradition. So it encompassed the two aspects of it, you know. And it was launched in the Willie Clancy Week in Milltown Malbay, and then we decided to launch it again in Dublin. We had the launch in Woodstock House in All Hallows, and I sent invites out to people, and Mick Flatley said he'd launch it for us, so which was fantastic, you know. But the number of musicians that came, the people that came out, I mean, on the night there was about, I'd say there must have been 300 people in the hall, you know, and the lads played, and it was a great night. You know, it was a great night, you know. And I was so, like, it was so good, and for them to be able to play their music and to be recognised. But there's not just music on it, there's chat. You know, and that happened by accident. Because the guys, they started chatting and telling stories, and, you know, and I said to John Blake when we were editing it, we have to put that on. We have to, that is so interesting for people to listen to. So in between the tunes, there's chat. You know?
It's so lovely to bring it full circle. Like, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of, like, even, you know, where would we be without all the blind harpers and all the, you know, the bardic harpers and all the compositions. And
I actually did introduce the harp as well into the school, and I did have a wee girl who was absolutely, she was super. She could play a lot of O'Carroll and stuff like that, and she was on the, had autism. But she was so musically inclined. She's fantastic. Ashley Fagan was her name. So it was great.
Will you play us another tune, Catherine? Would you mind?
Okay.
I've been starved to go to live music here for the last 2 years.
I was just thinking that, will I play a set of jigs? Because I don't think I played a set of jigs.
Lovely,
yeah. And I put these together. The first one I would have learned from Patsy Hanley. And the second tune is a composition of Josie McDermott's. It's called Dominic's Farewell to Cashel. And Dominic Cosgrove was the owner of a public house in Boyle that we used to frequent to play tunes with Josie and that. And a young Patsy Hanley would be sitting up at the bar playing the accordion, the button accordion at the time, And then the last tune I got from Brendan Toner, you know, the fiddle player who lived in the States, from Sligo.
Lovely composer,
and he called it The Lad from Kisco, as opposed to The Maids of Mount Cisco. And actually, when I was in New York, going up to the Catskills with Felix Dole, Felix was driving, and we went through this town called Kisco. And I said, is that where the Maids of Mount Kisco come from?
Lovely. they're great tunes, aren't they?
Lovely tunes, yeah.
Can I ask you as well, Catherine, about you played in Macala as well for a number of years. What was that like?
Oh, it was great. I remember at the time, it was just for the Dublin Folk Festival we got together. There were a lot of, obviously, lady musicians in and around Dublin, and we were asked by the committee just to get a group together. So we did. We got together for a concert in the Ormond Hotel at the time, and we put in a bit of practice. You know, the singers got together and we sourced music, because we had such a cohort of women. I mean, we had Maura O'Keefe from Kerry, we had Mary McNamara from Tulla, we had obviously myself from Birmingham, we had living in Ireland, and my sister-in-law, actually Paddy's sister, Paddy's mother, Jacinta, also played with us, and so there was a great spread. We had Mairead Weenie, because it was pre-Alton. You know, so I mean, there was a great source of music there from different areas and that, you know. So we put a program together, and we said, no, it's going to be very few at this, really. You know, it's going to be a small crowd and that. And I remember Joe's taking a peek outside. I'm sure there was a queue all the way down the quays. All the male musicians in Dublin were coming out to sing. And it was great. And just from that, we recorded 2 LPs with Ghriallais. And, you know, we did a few television programs and stuff like that, you know. So it was great. You know, and look, we still we're all still great friends, and we get together every so often. You know, and just resurrect things and talk, because it was in a time of our lives. We were, you know, a lot of us were married, and then the babies were coming along, and that. So obviously it was very hard to keep a group going on long term. You know. But it was great while it lasted. And actually, there a few years ago, we did a thing for the Temple Bar Shad Fest, and it was great. You know, it was really a good old buzz.
Because I know for you, like, you know, you're regardless of gender, you know, it's your flute playing that really defines you and the high standard of it. And but for some younger people that are studying the history and development of the flute, you know, we'd Dr. Aoife Gramble doing a Drawn from the Well episode for us, and was looking at pioneering female flute player, and Peg McGrath features there, and yourself, you know. Did you feel were there times, or were there any barriers to playing the flute when you were growing up in Birmingham or here?
No. It never entered my psyche, really, that I was, you know, I was sort of genderless as far as I was concerned when it came to playing music, when it came to playing the flute, you know. It was only really later that you know, I suppose I realised there weren't that many, you know. The only barrier to actually playing music were children. I remember
nephews are excused now, this is
sorry, Paddy. I remember being, you know, I stayed at home with for 9 or 10 years, you know, when the children were growing up, and I mean, I used to go out periodically and play in the session, John Kelly's session. You know, and that was great, just to keep my hand in. But most of the time I was walking around the kitchen, standing up so they couldn't get me. You know, and they would be sort of hovering around on the floor, you know. Or I can't remember who else was telling me. It was another a younger female musician that, you know, the gates that they put at the bottom of the stairs. She used to put the gate up and sit on the stairs, and the children were the other side of it, so that they couldn't get to her. You know. But you know, but then obviously it was great.
And speaking of osmosis as well, like your own children are all excellent traditional musicians. You know. So.
Well, they've been listening to it all their lives, again, you know, they would be hugely, I mean, they did go to formal lessons, like 2 of them would be fiddle players, and they went to classical training and then decided to go the traditional route. And Anton McGowan, who lives out near us, so he would have, you know, given them a heads up there. But an awful lot, again, by they would have learned through listening by osmosis. And the same with Fergus, who plays the flute. I don't think I ever gave Fergus a lesson in his life.
You
know, he just listened. And I'll tell you a funny story about, he's a huge fan of Jim Donahue. And when he was, I think it was the Dublin Fla, he decided he'd go in for the whistle. He just picked up the whistle at the time. And he learned Jim Donahue's reel from a recording. A la Jim Donahue with the extra bit
extra
in it.
bar. I was going to say,
bar.
I can see where this is going.
So he played it for me, and I said, "Oh, Fergus, that's wonderful. You know, that's great." But I don't know whether the adjudicator would sort of appreciate, you know, the. Well, I don't care. That's the way Jim Donahue played.
Oh, come on, yeah. He's dead right.
So,
but I think you've touched on this a little bit already. But your advice to young people learning, what would you?
Oh, I listening. You will learn more by listening than you will ever do going to all the workshops and that. But you see, I suppose from the point of view, the workshops are great because you get to record stuff and whoever's teaching and all that. But to open your mind and to listen to, you know, all the different instruments. You know, but of course the fiddle and the flute are where it's at. But no, but really and truly, you have to listen. You have to listen, and not just the commercial recordings, but you know, the stuff archival, the stuff that you have in here is priceless. You know, so you know, see, I think nowadays everybody is so intent on playing. You know. Even some of my own pupils, you know, I can tell the ones that listen and the ones that just come for the class every week and learn the bit, and you know, the others develop so much more than, you know. So I'm egging them on, and you know, and I lend them stuff. You know, I give them stuff to listen to. You know, so
and you've lived that yourself through. You know, what you were talking about earlier, slowing down. Reel to reels or the LPs and stuff.
You have to be self-motivating, and you know, it's really, really important.
One final question, Catherine. Your hopes for Irish traditional music, say in 50 or 100 years' time, maybe we'll all still be around, who knows, but...
you see, this, I've thought about this. There's so many aspects to traditional music. You know, and, you know, people try to categorize them, you know, and you hear people talking about, oh, the traditionalists, you know, and then there's sort of the, you know, the more commercial side of it. You know, there's room for everything. You know, there is room for everything. But I suppose the one thing that I would hope for is that we always have that the roots, and that people understand that it's the route that you have to go to the well. You know, you have to study it and listen to it and learn from it before you can't start up here. You have to start down there. That's it.
Lovely, Catherine. Thanks so much. Míle mágah don vertigo. I've learned a lot there and really enjoyed it. And do you think would you give us one tune for the road?
Well, will we do the Duke of Leinster and the ladies' Pantalettes? Or the Duke as Roger Sherlock? Who would have been another, along with obviously the great Tansy. Great influence on me, so I would have learnt these tunes from him.
Lovely.
So we'll finish on these, the Duke of Leinster, and as he calls it, the Duke of Leinster's wife, but it's the ladies' Pantalettes.
Lovely, very good,